President Trump, I just saw your press conference with President Putin, and it was embarrassing. I mean, you stood there like a little wet noodle, like a little fanboy. I mean, I was asking myself, when are you going to ask him for an autograph or for a selfie or something like that? I mean, you literally sold out at this press conference our intelligence community, our justice system, and worst of all, our country. You're the President of the United States. You shouldn't do that. I mean, what's the matter with you? I mean, whatever happened to the strong words or to the strength of Ronald Reagan when he stood there at the Berlin Wall and he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall? What happened to all that?
Oh, yeah. Come on, Arnie. You know what happened to all that. You know exactly what happened. Now, here we are. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up. It is Monday. We're kicking off another week. I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout for paid subscribers. I've got Dr. Jason Johnson joining me. Been a while since Jason was on the show. We covered a lot, and it's a great conversation. If you want to jump to it, you could skip to it right now. It starts about 44 minutes into today's show. But I've also got your headlines and a massive clip show for you here on a Monday as a result of the big summit between Putin and Trump, the big dick measuring contest, and I think we know who won. It was not our guy. Yep, that's sad. He's our guy. That's the guy that represents us and is getting absolutely rolled by Putin over and over and over again. Friday was no exception, so I've got a lot of reaction to it. I hope you had a good weekend. I'm glad to have you here, and I'm going to kick it off right now with the headlines that I've gathered for you. And don't forget to tell your friends, this is an ad-free show. It's independent media, entirely produced, booked, and hosted by me. And there's not another daily podcast, news podcast that I know of that exists that has a more comprehensive rundown and recap, including the clip show, than this right here, Stand Up with Pete Dominick. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick is how the show is powered. Go get a subscription now. Tell your friends. Edit your pledge up if you want to. And thanks to those who have, here's what I've got. All right. I think the big headlines, really, all of them, the main headlines are revolving around that summit between Putin and Trump in Alaska, or was it Russia, on Friday. And so I don't have a whole lot to add in terms of what transpired. Those are the leading stories, and there haven't been a lot of developments, though. Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff were on a couple of the Sunday shows, and they didn't really make any news. We have no idea what was discussed. We know nothing was agreed to, and we know there was no deal. And Trump admitted himself. I guess if there's any news, it's just that he said if there wasn't a ceasefire, there would be consequences. Well, there isn't a ceasefire, and there are no consequences. There really never seem to be any consequences when it comes to Trump and Putin. Other than, of course, for the Ukrainians and the rest of Europe and us. Even right-wing media has been pretty harsh on Trump and the meeting, specifically Fox News and the Wallstreet Journal. I mean, several anchors at Fox News, at least, admitting that it was a failure. Such a failure, in fact, so disastrous for Trump, I think, that he may have to bring up the Epstein files now as a distraction from the distraction that the meeting was from the Epstein files. So lots to say about that, but I'm just going to get to all of the rest of the headlines that aren't necessarily about that. All right, starting with this. Now, 3 Republican-led states are going to send members of their National Guard forces to Washington, D.C. to bolster the roughly 800 troops that our Mad King has already deployed to the city. They may now be armed. They weren't armed, but it looks like they might have weapons soon. Those states are West Virginia, South Carolina, and Ohio. West Virginia is sending 300 to 400. South Carolina is sending 200, and Ohio will send 150 military police from their National Guard, according to their Republican governors. So they're all now part of the game and the distraction and the disgrace that this is. All of these guys taken from their families, taken from their jobs to crack down on, well, nothing. They're really doing nothing so far, other than apparently trying to make friends in the community mostly and arresting like delivery people. It's absolutely absurd. And in a related story, restaurant attendants in the nation's capital has taken a dive in the wake of the occupation by the military, according to data from Open Table. Last Monday, our Mad King announced he was taking federal control of D.C.'s police department, deploying the National Guard in the city. And then we've seen the restaurant attendance apparently plummet precipitously, according to this. The other big story starting off this week is that Hurricane Erin, which had exploded into a Category 5 powerhouse hurricane, was downgraded to a Category 3. She's still a major hurricane, the 5th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season and the first to reach hurricane status. And it's growing in size, a trend expected to continue over the next few days, according to the Hurricane Center. And I don't know if the Hurricane Center is even well-resourced anymore. It might just be a bunch of Cub Scouts with a compass at this point, but hopefully it is, and we'll be able to track it effectively and accurately, and it won't come too close to the Atlantic coast. Tens of thousands of demonstrators gathered in Tel Aviv, Israel, to call for an end to the war in Gaza and the release of the hostages, one of the largest demonstrations in Israel since the start of fighting in October 2023. The rally last night was a culmination of a day of nationwide protests and a general strike to pressure the government to halt the military campaign. Bring them all home. Stop the war, shouted the vast crowd, which had converged on the so-called Hostage Square in Tel Aviv Plaza, a focal point for protesters throughout the war. So I thought that was a pretty big deal, and we should definitely give them credit and mention that. They're doing a better job, it would seem, in many ways. It's a different country in a different situation protesting than what is happening in America, though there were a lot of protests over the weekend that I saw. I'm not sure how big they were. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is now showing that food prices have spiked by 2.9% since last July, and wholesale prices on fresh fruit and dry vegetables increased by nearly 40% last month. This is the biggest increase in the last 3 years. Rising prices likely to continue. Why? Because of our Mad King's tariffs and trade war. Producers are already seeing rising costs. The Labor Department's Producer Price Index, a measure of inflation on wholesale goods and producer costs, increased by nearly 1 percentage point from June to July. Wholesale prices are up by 3.3% over last July. These numbers significantly higher than economists predicted. This is no small thing, and if you've noticed, that's why. Fewer Americans now say they're drinking alcohol these days. How about that? Is that you? I'm drinking a little less, at least lately. Only 54% report they consume alcoholic beverages. Wow, only 54%? The lowest percentage in nearly 90 years of polls that track alcohol consumption across the country. The sobering statistic comes from Gallup, which has polled Americans on their drinking habits since 1939. Record low of 54% in 2025 compares with the all-time high 71%, which was reported from 1976 to 1978. So they're not sure why, but they think because there's a lot of new reporting or data that says alcohol consumption can be bad for your health. Well, in moderation. Even low levels of drinking, they say, can lead to certain cancers and heart problems. Well, then we're all fucked. I don't know what to tell you about it. I think it's probably because more people are using weed. How about that? Former Fox News host Jeanine Pirro, apparently, she's now the current United States attorney for D.C., which is just crazy. Apparently, she reportedly turned down Trump's offer for a job at the FBI because she did not want to work under Kash Patel. I don't know if that reporting is right, but I want to believe it because that's awesome and also terrible and scary. And finally, the First Lady of the United States is Melania Trump, which is a crazy thing to say. And she wrote a letter, apparently. She wrote a letter to Vladimir Putin, who apparently immediately read her letter in front of summit delegates. And she urged him to protect the world's children. And it's being ridiculed. The letter is public, and it should be. And it's really bad. And she's really bad. And I just wanted to mention that right now. I mean, yeah, it's a good effort, Melania, but somehow I don't think it's going to be anything other than another feather in Vladimir Putin's cap. And speaking of feathers and caps, I don't have a segue. That is your news update. I do have a great clip show for you, though. Lots of clips, most of them in reference to Trump-Putin's meeting, but a few others as well. But let's get started with a C-SPAN caller who I loved very much. This is Frank. He's calling in on the Republican line, and this is on C-SPAN after the summit. Here we go.
It's Frank, Zephyr, Florida, Republican. Good morning.
Well, good morning to you.
What did you think, Frank, about the summit?
Well, I thought it was a farce. To be honest with you, you're doing a flyover. You're supposed to do that afterwards. You wait until you get something. Second of all, You don't treat a man like that. That's your enemy. You don't give him a red carpet. On that plane going down there, he said one thing. If he doesn't give me what I want, then I'm going to give him sanctions. He didn't give him those sanctions. Third of all, I hope he enjoyed that lobster and that filet mignon and the red wine that the taxpayers had to pay for. I am so pissed at this. He got nothing. Absolutely nothing. Did you see how smug he looked sitting there?
You're talking about
like
Putin?
A child?
You're talking about Putin looked... You're saying
I'm
Putin
talking
looked,
about Trump.
Trump looked smug?
Looked like a child.
Did you?
There.
You're a Republican, Frank. Did you vote for Mr. Trump?
Of course I did, but I ain't voting no more because the guy's a liar.
All right.
That's all he knows how to do is lie. That's it.
Wait a second. I don't know if that guy's a Trump supporter or not. Now I'm confused. He certainly had the accent of one. Hey, that's not fair, Pete. You know, it's fair. All right, here is Fox News' Jackie Heinrich. She is the White House correspondent for Fox News, traveling with the president in Anchorage. And this was her reaction. Again, this is the Fox News lady's reaction.
It was just very unusual, atypical, and I think we're all awaiting, the readout, because the way that it felt in the room was not good. It did not seem like things went well, and it seemed like Putin came in and steamrolled, got right into what he wanted to say, and got his photo next to the president and then left.
All right. Wow. How about that? Well, Peter Alexander of NBC also played armchair psychologist and said this right after the meeting in Alaska.
Just pulling back the curtain here, what struck me, Jen, in particular, was really just the looks on the faces of a lot of the American delegation here. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, Steve Witkoff, who came into the room, then left quickly, then came back in. Leavitt appeared to be a bit stressed out, anxious. Their eyes were wide, almost ashen at times. Those were some of the sort of images that will stick with me as we leave here. This was not the way the president likes to do things. He likes to be the producer of this presidency. He got that in the first half of the day, but when he was behind closed doors with Vladimir Putin, it looks like he didn't come away with anything that he claimed he wanted. He said he'd go home unhappy if there was no ceasefire. They didn't declare one here today.
All right. Peter Alexander describing facial expressions and the colors of people. I don't know. What do you think? Is that fair? All right. Well, let's go to somebody who got it all wrong his whole career, really. Well, not his whole career, but towards the end of his career, which is somehow still going. It's Mark Halperin, everybody. He is a political analyst, and he was on YouTube or whatever his dumb show is, and he predicted, this is before the Trump-Putin meeting, that Trump is going to arrest Putin. And he had Sean Spicer and some other dude on the panel. And I only play this because the guy should be discredited and never be invited anywhere in public to comment on politics because of things like this.
A serious question. What's the % chance that the United States arrests Putin today? That's what I'm looking for. Dan, what's the % chance they arrest him as a war criminal? Zero. Sean?
Zero.
Okay. When it happens, we'll post this moment. And I'll just say before we take your questions, we two-way tonight is on the 2028.
Wait, do you disagree? Yeah. Do you disagree?
Oh no, I think they're going to arrest him. I think that's the whole thing is to trick him to coming to the U.S. and going to arrest him. He's a war criminal.
That he is, but
yeah. So let's see. But my point is we may do a special report. Just we'll see this weekend. That's one thing to look for is if we decide to do a special report because they've arrested Putin.
Arrested him? What? Well, they didn't arrest him. So you were wrong. It was a real gamble to make the prediction, Halperin, but you did it anyway. Real risk taker, including at work where he had young women who were working for him sit on his lap while he had an erection. Yeah, that was the complaint against Mark Halperin, one of many that forced him out of corporate media. And he'll find his way back. I think he already has, right? Well, will that clip find its way back to Mark Halperin? Please send it to him. Okay, moving on. I got to play from the Sunday show. There's a lot of different clips, but just a lot of different Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff stuff. But I thought the best one was here from Meet the Press with Kirsten Welker on NBC. They played old Marco Rubio for new Marco Rubio, and it's pretty good.
Terry, I want to play something you said about President Putin. This was right after the invasion in March of 2022. Take a look.
This guy lies, habitually lies. He's never kept a deal he's ever signed, and he lies all the time. And I don't know why, but he plays us like a violin in the West, because the West wants to believe that you can cut a deal with everybody. You can't cut a deal with guys like this. He's a professional, experienced liar.
Mr. Secretary, given that, what makes you think that if you are able to reach a deal with President Putin, that he would stick to it, based on, as you just said, he's a liar?
Well, that's the point. That's why the deal has to have enforceable mechanisms in it. That's why the deal has to have things like security guarantees. That's the point I was making a few minutes ago when you were asking me about looking someone in the eye. What's important here is actions, not words, not paper, document. Those are all important. Those are elements of a deal, but they have to be enforceable. They have to be verifiable. They have to be enduring. There's no point here in signing a deal that's going to be violated in 3 or 4 months. There's no point in doing that. It actually would make things worse. So that's why this is such a difficult thing. Not only do you need a deal, you need a deal that's verifiable, that's enforceable, and that's enduring. If you don't achieve that, then I think you could have a ceasefire for a few months, a few weeks, and then the war will start again and more people will die. That's not the outcome we're interested in. That's not the outcome anyone wants. So that's why this is so difficult.
All right.
Oh, man. Old Marco Rubio, when there's a Democrat in office, is so much different than new Marco Rubio when he is the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor for the worst guy ever, a guy that Marco Rubio fucking hated and I'm sure still hates. But hey, power, right? I guess. I don't know. All these wives, I wonder about all their wives, like Marco Rubio's wife and like Usha Vance that signed up for this stuff. I mean, I don't have a lot of empathy for them, obviously. Maybe some, though. They're like, this is the ride I'm on? Can I get off? I can't? I shouldn't? I don't know. They make the gamble. That's going to be a weird thing. I wonder about the wives a lot. You know, specifically of the husbands who at one point called Trump the worst names. That's why I'm thinking of Vance and Rubio. All right, before I go to the Steve Witkoff clips, here is Howie Kurtz. This is on Fox News on his Sunday program, which analyzes like the media. And there is some Trump audio here. It's very brief, but he has a good just montage of clips. But more importantly, this is on Fox News. So
some upbeat talk. It was clear not much was accomplished. No ceasefire, no details, no questions from the press, just vague assurances that some progress was made without explaining what that was. President Trump, to his credit, didn't oversell what happened, or more precisely, what didn't happen.
There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there.
The president, who meets with Zelensky and European leaders tomorrow at the White House, said there would probably be another meeting with Putin. The media reaction to the Alaska session varied sharply, but much of it was negative.
So he went for a ceasefire. He leaves with nothing. Putin got a flyover, a red carpet, a lot of handshakes.
The big winner of today's summit, outside of all of that, what we just saw, was undoubtedly Vladimir Putin.
This joint news conference was anything but. It was not a news conference. There were no questions taken by either leader. There were many yelled by reporters there. But we don't have a sense of what exactly is in this agreement or this deal.
I think it was brilliant by President Trump to actually say, look, we don't want to just give an unlimited podium to Vladimir Putin. Go ahead and make his comments so that President Trump can clean up any messes that may have been left on aisle 7.
The more I replay it in my mind, it is so extraordinarily vague. It lacked almost any real substance.
Yeah, there you go. Well, there's a roundup of clips. Then how he went to his first guest, who is Rich Lowry, who's a real weird cat. I should tell you stories about him sometime. Anyway, This is now, let's move on to something else. How about we go to an actual Ukrainian? Yeah, I thought this was pretty good. This is a Ukrainian former minister who was on CNN with Christian Amanpour. His name is Dimitru Kuleba, I think, maybe.
Putin suggested is this: I grabbed some of your lands. I'm ready to withdraw from tiny bits of your lands, but you will promise that you will never try to reclaim the vast lands that I will keep under my control, and you will recognize them legally. So, even in a nightmare, you don't have to be a lawyer to understand that this deal has nothing to do with land swap. It's going to die. There is nothing to swap because all of this territory is Ukrainian. The only viable solution for the land issue, which indeed is the biggest obstacle in negotiations, is to leave this matter in the gray zone where both sides will claim their title of ownership on this land. If President Putin does not make that concession, these talks are not going to go anywhere. By the way, you can hear the air raid siren behind my back.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Air raid sirens are going off there in Kyiv while he was on CNN. And I'm not sure where this was. I wish I was there because she was there. But this is Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She was asked about Trump and if she could say something. Well, it's pretty straightforward and it's real succinct and always great. The woman who has my vote for head of America, it's Jasmine Crockett.
If you could tell Donald Trump anything tonight, what would you tell him?
I would tell him to grow a spine and stop being Putin's hoe.
What? That really happened? It's so amazing.
Stop being Putin's hoe. Putin's hoe.
I did a little remix. Sorry. Getting carried away. But somebody who's got a lot more editing talented, music talent than I do should go ahead and mock that up. Maybe it'll be me. I don't want to be the one that puts a target on her. I don't know that I want to promote that one too much more because I don't want to lash out and target her more because I don't think it's good or safe. But that was so fun. All right. What else do I have for you here on the Clip Show? How about the former NATO Supreme Commander, someone who's joined me several times here on the show? This is Admiral James Stavridis. He was on CNN with Michael Smerconish, who I'm not a huge fan of, used to work with, and I don't love what he does in general. And so anyway, I thought this was interesting analysis and weird moments with Smerconish. Anyway, Stavridis Smerconish. Sexy.
I'm going to park on severe consequences. I think that is the ultimate tell. It is whether or not President Trump is going to impose a price on Vladimir Putin for what, clearly was yet another round of rope-a-dope by Putin, just coming in, trying to be charming as a thug like Putin can be, and seeking to kind of tap along the president's words, not mine. So will we impose some sanctions, some consequences, Michael? I think we should. I think there should be military consequences. For example, triple the number of F-16 fighter aircraft. I think there should be economic consequences, secondary sanctions. And let's go after this oil smuggling fleet that Russia is running, start impounding those vessels. And then thirdly, politically, I would like to see not bringing the Ukrainians directly into NATO, that would be quite explosive, but opening the taps for various forms of NATO cooperation, including with NATO centers of excellence in cyber, air defense, land warfare, for example. So I think there's plenty of arrows in the quiver that President Trump has. The question is, will he get out a bow and start shooting a few toward Moscow?
Okay, so in a nice and gentlemanly like way, you're completely dismissive of me saying maybe there's a glimmer of hope. Because as I think about it, Admiral, how could they have stood on that stage and said, hey, we're in agreement on the most significant of issues? Then everybody would be saying, how can you do that without Zelensky and Ukraine at the table?
I like your thinking. As you said, it's a glass half full. And as the saying goes, from your lips to God's ears, I think the tell in that scenario is going to pop on Monday when we see what the White House meeting looks like between Zelensky and President Trump. Here, I'm kind of with you. I'm hopeful that Zelensky will have learned from his first go-round in the White House. I think President Trump really does want to resolve this crisis. And here's the missing man in the conversation so far that neither you nor I have mentioned. It's the Europeans. Where are they going to land? To what degree can they pull Trump toward that axis of Kyiv, Paris, London, Berlin? That is going to be the thing to watch. The Europeans, as well as the actual meeting Monday. And I hope your scenario comes to pass.
Yeah, I'm not wagering on it. I'm just trying to be fair. And I'm hearing all the criticism. I'm hearing all the criticism. Oh, my God, they rolled out a red carpet as if he should have kneed him in the groin the minute that he stepped off the plane. I mean, he's trying to cut a deal. President Trump, is trying to cut a deal. I'm willing to give him credit for that so long as he doesn't sell out Ukraine in the process. And there's no suggestion that he's done so at this stage.
What? There's no suggestion that he's sold out Ukraine in the process at this stage? He has sold out Ukraine as often and as terribly as he can as president. He's been rhetorically critical, and he has done everything he can to make it harder for them to win. And has only been stopped by Republicans in Congress and just a little bit. So he's definitely sold out. He had him in, Michael, he had him in the Oval Office and tried to embarrass him. Well, I think he embarrassed himself, but do not remember that. Yeah, he hasn't sold out. He hasn't sold out Zelensky so far. The hell? The fuck? All right. Well, I also want to go back to Fox News. This is Shannon Bream. She's talking to Steve Witkoff. He's the chief negotiator on both Ukraine, Russia, and Gaza and Israel. The Arab-Israeli conflict is being negotiated by a real estate developer who Trump knows and trusts, who has no idea what the fuck he's doing. Somehow Trump thinks that the idea of negotiating a real estate deal is similar to negotiating between two countries. And I don't know. I'm not smart enough or articulate enough to describe just how different those two things are. But they're like two things that are very, very different. And that's the way I would describe it, because I'm not good enough. And the idea that Steve Witkoff, this guy, is anywhere near negotiations here is obviously terrifying. And if it wasn't so terrifying, it would be laughable. And if it wasn't that, it would be enraging. Anyway, here he is, Witkoffing on Fox News.
Chief. So let's talk about the security guarantees, because you mentioned those. What does that mean in practicality? What is the U.S. willing to commit to that effort to give Ukraine the assurances it needs to come to the table?
It means that the United States is potentially prepared to be able to give Article 5 security guarantees, but not from NATO, directly from the United States and other European countries. That is big. I mean, really big.
Does it mean boots on the ground? What does it mean? But logistically?
I think part of the discussion that we're going to have on Monday throughout the day, because there's going to be breakout sessions there, is exactly the specifics of what the Ukrainians feel that they need. Because remember, as mediators, we were at this summit to advance the Ukrainian position, and we did that. And we did it successfully. Now it's for us to drill down on the granular details of exactly what the Ukrainians need to give them a sense of security in the future. And, by the way, what the Europeans need as well. And we were fully committed to be there for that purpose.
All right, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff.
All right, well, let's see if Jake Tapper can do any better, or if he's going to try to Witkoff his way out of this one, too.
You mentioned the Article 5 guarantee of NATO, an attack on one is an attack on all. Russia would allow that to happen, that any further incursions into Ukraine, Russia would understand would be seen as an attack on all NATO members?
No, Jake, that's not what I said. What I said is that we got to an agreement that the United States and other European nations could effectively offer Article 5-like language to cover a security guarantee. So Putin has said that a red flag is NATO admission.
Right.
And so what we were discussing was assuming that that held, assuming that the Ukrainians could agree to that and could live with that, and everything is going to be about what the Ukrainians can live with. But assuming they could, we were able to win the following concession: that the United States could offer Article 5-like protection, which is one of the real reasons why Ukraine wants to be in NATO. We sort of were able to bypass that and get an agreement that the United States could offer Article 5 protection, which was the first time we had ever heard the Russians agree to that.
Oh, yeah, Wickoff, so sexy. Really is just so smooth and melodic. And now here is a Republican senator. They're supposed to be tough on Russia, but this guy's name is Schmidt. I think it's Greg Schmidt. It's one of the two senators from Missouri, and he did his best to kiss Trump's ass with the same Fox News anchor in the same show, Shannon Bream.
So we talked about tough consequences on Putin if there wasn't some agreement about ending the war or ceasefire or something actionable out of that meeting on Friday. So when you talk about that, you talk about sanctions. There is this package sitting in the Senate with more than 80 senators. Hard to get 80 of you to agree on anything about this new sanctions package that would not only go after Russia, but also its best customers, India, China, Brazil. You haven't signed on to that bill. Why not? And do you think it's time for the president to use that lever?
Well, I think we need to follow the commander-in-chief's lead here. He's the one that's sitting across the table from Vladimir Putin. He's the one that'll be in the Oval Office tomorrow with President Zelensky and other European allies. And I think ultimately here, too, the Europeans, I'm glad they're going to be there because I've been saying this. I know President Trump has been saying this. Vice President Vance has been saying this. The future of Europe, of course, lies also with the Europeans. They're finally, I think, stepping up to the table as far as their own defense. If President Putin is, in fact, this existential threat, they need to treat it like that. So I think bringing everybody together is what President Trump is doing. We just didn't see that the last 4 years. Joe Biden was out to lunch, and his only plan was to send $200 billion of American taxpayer funds over there without a plan. And so President Trump, I think, is seeking peace. He's bringing the parties together, and that's what diplomacy is all about. That should always be our first option, and that's where we're at right now. So whatever.
Okay, thank you, Senator. We're going to have to ask you to wrap. Thank you. Good stuff. Really, we'll see you next time on Shannon Bream's Fun Time Comedy Hour, Fox News Sunday, whatever the hell the show is called. All right, that's all the clips I've got for you regarding or in reference to Russia Trump. There's so much other good stuff out there, including better analysis than I found. So sorry if I didn't do a good enough job on that, but we're going to hear a lot more after today with Zelensky and European leaders visiting the White House, which is going to be another circus, I am sure. But I do have a few more clips for you that I think are of great importance, including this clip from MSNBC where they were talking to New Yorker reporter. His name is David Kilpatrick, and they have a huge story that David Rothkopf mentioned last week, and everybody should read. This is a story from the New Yorker, a deep dive, an investigation into how much money Trump and his family have made because of his time at the White House last time and his return, more importantly. He estimated the family's raked in more than $3 billion since the start of Trump's second term. Here is David Kilpatrick talking about it on MSNBC, and he's been doing rounds just about everywhere. I thought this was a good one.
Donald Trump is profiting off of being president of the United States. We all know that Trump allegedly made billions before he became president, and he has repeatedly refused to release his tax returns and has blatantly blurred the lines between business and government. All this is now the subject of a blockbuster new piece by David Kilpatrick in The New Yorker. David writes, quote, "Many payments now flowing to Trump, his wife, and his children and their spouses would be unimaginable without his presidencies. A $2 billion investment from a fund controlled by the Saudi Crown Prince, a luxury jet from the Emir of Qatar, profits from at least 5 different ventures peddling crypto, fees from an exclusive club stocked with cabinet officials and named executive branch." And David Kirkpatrick joins us now. He's a staff writer for The New Yorker. David, thank you for being here. So just let's talk facts and figures. How much exactly is Donald Trump and his family benefiting from him being president a second time?
Well, the number I came up with was $3.4 billion. That's
with a B.
That with a B. And some of that stretches back to before he re-entered the White House. Some of that was payments from Saudi Arabia investing in this fund with Jared Kushner. But almost all of it, the lion's share of it, is in just the last 6 months since he re-entered the White House. And what I did was to go through various businesses and income streams and ask myself, is this money from the presidency? Would he have made this money if he was just a reality TV show host or a real estate guy? And then I did my best to try to figure out what that was worth, really conservatively in every case. And I really tried to show my work. So readers can go through and see for themselves. If they think I'm undervaluing the amount of money that Jared Kushner made off the Saudis, they can make that decision for themselves. Or maybe they think I'm overvaluing it. But no matter how you slice it, it's a lot of money, right? Even if you knock out the 300 or so that 300 million or so that I calculate Jared Kushner's income stream from that Saudi investment or the other investments through his private equity firm are worth right now, well, that's still over $3 billion.
All right. Well, I got to read that one or listen to it as you can if you're a subscriber to The New Yorker, which I am, because I'm a sophisticated douche. All right. Well, I've got a couple of governors for you. I want to play first. It's the Maryland governor, the great and powerful Wes Moore, reacting to Republican governors sending the National Guard to D.C., even though he's right there on the doorstep and he didn't send his. Why?
I am the commander-in-chief of the Maryland National Guard. Period and full stop. That I'm the 63rd governor of the state of Maryland, but along with that means I am the commander-in-chief of our state's National Guard and our state's Air Guard. And I will not authorize the usage of our National Guard for something that is not mission critical or mission aligned. Period and full stop. So if the idea comes in, or if the request comes in to mobilize a National Guard in either one of our cities or another city, and I do not deem it to be mission critical or mission aligned, I can give you my answer in one word: no. Because as the commander in chief, this is something I take very seriously. And I take it very seriously, both from a professional perspective, but also from a personal perspective. Because unlike the president of the United States, I've actually worn the uniform of this country. Unlike the president of the United States, I actually deployed overseas and fought on behalf of the United States of America. I know what it's like to say goodbye to my family. I know what it's like to wear a U.S.-issued military uniform. I know what it's like to patrol communities. And so I do not need and will not accept any type of lecture from someone who the only uniform they have worn is a Brooks Brothers suit about how to utilize members of the National Guard.
Wes Moore not fucking around. That should be his slogan for his campaign. Wes Moore, NFA. Not fucking around. You know who else isn't? Should join him on that slogan tour. It's Gavin Newsom. I'd like to see the two of these guys somewhere together, talking and taking questions and stuff. Come on. That would be a sexy duo. That's the third time I've talked about people being sexy here on today's clip show. I don't know what this is all about.
To Kathy Hochul, gratitude to J.B. Pritzker for recognizing the urgency of the moment, for hosting the Texas delegation. Deep gratitude to the Texas delegation for raising the awareness and the stakes that put a lot of wind in our sail, that gave us the ability to make the case to our legislature. But now it's time to act. Now it's time to take it to the next step. And it's not just those two that have already demonstrated a commitment on this. It's many other states. There are a lot of other blue states out there. Let's go. This is it. There's no dress rehearsal. We need to wake up. We cannot survive if he rigs not just Texas, but he goes to Indiana, goes to Missouri, goes to Ohio, he goes to Florida. We have to have other governors of like mind, and there are many, to now do something, not just say something.
Yeah, do something, not just say something. Action, not words. Gavin, Wes, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. Now let's two more quick clips. This is from Mehdi Hassan, the God of Thunder, as I refer to him, I think the most probably effective progressive in all of media, maybe, in terms of his performance and how he does what he does. Anyway, he was on that YouTube show, Jubilee. If you haven't seen these, I think they're fascinating. I know many of you have, where like one liberal or one conservative gets surrounded by 20, almost always young. Yeah, they're almost always young. I think that's the prerequisite. People who don't agree with them. And here he is talking about just his reaction to, or what he learned from being a participant. His was particularly egregious in terms of how awful and honest the white supremacist, fashion Christian nationalist types that attended and tried to debate him were.
The most alarming thing about the debate, the most alarming thing about the debate is these people exist. Not just that they exist, they've always existed in the US, let's not be naive, but that they're willing to say this stuff out loud now. Like one guy claims to have lost his job, the fascist guy. I'm not sure how true that is. People are saying online he actually lost his job earlier. He's pretending that he was a free speech martyr. But most of them are fine. They'll all be fine. Some of them are grabbing new followers on social media. I looked at a couple of their accounts. They're loving the reaction they've had from their friends. It is very worrying. It is very alarming that we live in a country where you can now go on TV and say in front of millions of people, not condemn the Nazi Holocaust. That you can tell an American brown citizen that they have to get out of the country. They'll be the first to go. That is alarming. And I don't know how many times I can say this. We are living in a fascist moment in American history. For the complacent folks on the left who say, well, it's actually about economics. It's actually about poverty. It's actually about trade. No, it's very much about race and democracy. It's very much about a group of white supremacists and fascists who want to make America great again by making it white again and making it less democratic in the process. And we need to be very aware of that.
Yes, well said, well said. The God of Thunder. I think that's what I'll start calling him. Sorry, I watched a little Thor over the weekend. It's Mehdi Hassan. Speaking of British expats, how about this one? John Oliver on Last Week Tonight. Just a little clip from his show about how dangerous Washington, D.C. is, according to Republicans.
D.C. is not safe. People don't just walk the streets in D.C. and feel safe anywhere around D.C.
I drive around in Washington, D.C. in my Jeep, and yes, I do drive myself, and I don't buckle up. And the reason why I don't buckle up, and people can say whatever they want to, they can raise their eyebrows at me again, is because of carjacking.
You don't want to go out on the streets at night in Washington, D.C. That's one of, I come from a family of public educators. That's one of the reasons I live in my office at night. But the other reason is it's too dadgum dangerous, brother.
Okay, I have a lot of questions, but my main one is, why is coming from a family of public educators a reason to sleep in your office at night? It's like saying I come from a family of gastroenterologists, that's why I sleep in an abandoned Ferris wheel. Is that why? And I should note, Burchett also told reporters in February that he sleeps in his office because it helps him stay productive and get to meetings early, all of which feel like excuses for something else going on in his life. Because why are you sleeping in your office, Tim? Is it crime? Is it productivity? Or is it that things aren't great at home right now and your wife threw all your daggum stuff onto the curb?
All right, there you go. A little bit from John Oliver on Last night. And now it's time to get to my guest. I hope you liked the clip show and the headlines. If you did, please tell your friends. And if you really like it and you can afford to pay more, that would be... This is why I plug it then, because it puts a lot of work, takes a lot of work to put into all of that segment. It's the hardest part of the show, really. And so if you get a lot out of it and you can pay more, thanks. Thank you. You can always do that. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Nobody does it like him, huh? That guy, Pete. All right, let's get to my guest. It's Jason Johnson, who is one of my oldest friends in all of political media. We met when we were both on air together at CNN, in an old segment they called Political Buzz. And it was me and him and often Will Kane. Those were the days, right? Learn more about him at drjasonjohnson.com. But he is a professor of politics and journalism at the School of Global Journalism and Communication and author of the book Political Consultants and Campaigns, One Day to Sell. He focuses on politics, political communication, strategy, public culture. You've seen him on MSNBC as a contributor and even also an anchor. Of course, he joined me and still joins a lot of those folks over at SiriusXM. And I'm always glad when he can be here to talk to us because, he's got a PhD in political science from UNC Chapel Hill. So he's a pretty smart cat, right? Well, I caught up with Jason late last week, where he was babysitting his cousin's kids. So I guess guess they're his cousins. We tried to figure that out here at the beginning, but I got to meet him right before we pressed tape. 10 and 12-year-old boys, young men, very cool. And Jason and I had a great conversation, as we always do. I hope that you like it. You can watch it at youtube.com/standupwithpete. Let's do it.
We are live. We are live, and you're getting me at this unique moment where you're seeing me as a nominally responsible adult, Pete.
You have your cousins there visiting, your cousins' kids. You call them your cousins. I don't know what anything means. I was just hanging out with my once removed or whatever. I had a great time with them. But there's three of them there. There are two boys and a girl.
So there's two of them, and they are my dad's brother's kids. So it's my cousin.
Got it.
And these are his children, he and his wife's children. So
now,
I'm hanging out with them.
Do you like to do you choose, hey, I'd like to hang out with these kids? You don't have kids. You like to be around kids. You serve a girl.
Yeah, they're family. I like love them to death. Like I have a lot of fun with them and get to see them pretty frequently. And we hang out, and sometimes I just want to like play video games. But today is, you do the thing that you do for family, which is, everybody, their parents have stuff that they have to do today. And I was like, cool, I'll take the boys. We'll go to the park. We'll go to the movies. We'll do all the fun stuff.
That's the question I was asking, really. It's because sometimes you say to your cousin or, to your sibling who has kids, you say, hey, listen, if you ever need someone to take them, I'm here for you. Just don't ask, because I like being around and we have a good time and, to help you guys out. But sometimes people just say, hey, let me take the kids. Let's go have some fun. And I can see you wanting to borrow anybody's kids because you're a child.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you have a lot of common interests in terms of film, television, video games, toys, comic books. Like so much of your interest, I imagine, crosses over, especially with the traditional little American boy. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, look, the thing is, I go and hang out with them, and sometimes I'll just be like, let me just take the boys and we'll go to the park. And, it's funny. You're a parent, so you know what this is like. The greatest gift that you can ever give parents is like just sometimes an afternoon and just be like, hey, I'm going to come by so you can nap. And I'm just going to take the kids to the park and get them some ice cream or stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah. And they're very, very smart, and very curious. And so that's also very fun for me because they will banter back and forth with me and whatever it is that I want to ask. And of course, question me relentlessly.
Right. That must be fun to have you, a PhD, as a kind of role model adult that they can ask questions to that isn't a parent. And also, I can't imagine how you're radicalizing them with your views.
That is the plan. Look, I definitely do that with my goddaughter, who's 14 now. I mean, I've been planting the seeds of revolution since she was a child. And the things that I used to tell her when she was 9, she's like, oh my gosh, you're so political. Now she's saying that they're all right. I got the most validating text message in the world. Again, I know you appreciate this. She said, I need to ask your opinion because you're right about things. I'm going to frame that. Like a 14-year-old saying like, because you're right about things a lot is amazing. I was very pleased. So, when she's 16, she'll say I'm wrong again. So
I think a guy like you's got a lot of words. Me too. Not as many and not always as good or as appropriate, but I got a lot of words, a comedian and a person that reads and stuff. But in our case, it's more actions speak louder than words. So they watch how you conduct yourself and so on. And now you've got propaganda literally on. Why don't you lean back and show the people what you're wearing around these young black children?
Black voters matter.
It was either that or I was going to say Aquaman. Sure. I
was going to have something with a kufi or an ankh on it, just, to give the kids a general idea that they should constantly be fighting the man.
Do you think like those kids seem to be their dad has a pretty good job, you told me, and stuff. Like, do you think young, black kids in upper middle class neighborhoods, much less and others, are more attuned to and paying more attention to what's going on in the kind of the larger world? Because I feel like apathy is of all young people because they're young and things are going good.
Here's the thing. I don't know if I consider it to be apathy depending on their age, right? Yeah. They're kids. I mean, like their greatest adventure is watching cartoons. Once you get to say 12, 13, 14, then your awareness of the world outside of your home and immediate family kind of increases. But I think kids 10 and below, their whole life is their family, unless it is brought up in the terms of, like, let's say, if you're 8 and you have a cousin or a sibling who is developmentally disabled, right?
Right.
Where you're going to be aware of things that another 9-year-old isn't going to know, right?
But I guess what I'm getting at, because I really don't know the answer to this, I'm not sure that you do either. It's because it's so much different than it was when we were growing up. But what I'm getting at is, if you have less, a lot of times people will say, when they're growing up, I didn't know how bad it was. To me, I had a great childhood. Even though we had nothing, my parents loved me and blah, blah, blah. But I feel like now, if that's your lot in life, if you're living in the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder, I guess, or if you're living in poverty, you do know how the other half or the others are living because of social media, because of the internet, and maybe you don't because you're not on it because you're sick.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It depends on what you get access to. So I'll give you a perfect example. Like, I have a yard, right? Like, I don't have a jungle gym or whatever else it is in my yard. I got a front and a backyard. As far as they're concerned, there's like dirt and rocks and sticks. That's awesome. That's a yard, for them. So all things being relative, kids only know what they know. And I think even in a way, social media only has an impact if you really understand the world outside of your house. If you don't really see the world outside of your house, or outside of where your parents take you, or school or something else like that, seeing a big mansion on social media when you're 8 or 9 years old, I mean, you recognize it's a big house, but that doesn't necessarily make you think yours is small, because everything you want to do is in your house. So, I think that, like, comparison requires a level of experience that some children don't have. And I say that as somebody, again, I am not a parent, right? I have active roles in my goddaughter's lives and cousins and stuff like that. But I think in a lot of cases, kids are still kids. They are still kids. It is refreshing how oblivious they are to the shenanigans that happen all over the planet. Now, again, if I'm 7 and my mother or father has been yanked out of their car by ICE agents, then I am aware of the world, right? If I am 10 and I see my dad get harassed by a cop or yelled at in a store, like your introduction to the cruelties and vagaries of the world at large have to do with what you've seen through your parents' eyes, because you're probably not going to experience it yourself directly.
I could talk to you about this and these perspectives for a long time. I want to ask you a bunch of things. We haven't talked in a while, off or in public on air.
Dude, I've been running like crazy. In the last month, I've had an insane travel schedule for the last month, like 3 weeks straight. I gave a speech in Indianapolis. Went to the WNBA All-Star thing. I had a tooth pulled, which was crazy. Then I was in Charleston for a speech, and I was at San Diego Comic-Con. Then I was in New York, and then I was back in D.C., like back-to-back. And then I just finished hosting for like 4 or 5 straight days. So the last month has been like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, I did see that you were on MSNBC last night, and I'm glad you're busy if that's what you want to be. And doing a lot. You're also, so what else are you doing, like, work-wise? You're back to teaching in the fall semester?
Yeah. So classes start in like 2 weeks. So, be teaching my usual media literacy class. And then I'm not sure what I'm teaching to graduate students yet. I got to double check my syllabus. I was at Comic-Con this year talking to a bunch of different publishers about my graphic novel. My graphic novel is finished. So now we're just doing the shopping publisher thing, which is super exciting, and connecting it with artists and stuff like that. Thanks to your advice and suggestion, I have been working on my YouTube and learning how that works and all the different dynamics that come into play. So it's been an active summer. I'm actually uncharacteristically optimistic about the fall. I think there's like a lot of awesome projects that I'm a bunch of different pies I'm baking right now. So I expect it to be a good fall. To be a good fall. I mean, football season is about to start, so I'm going to be doing a lot of sports stuff too.
I don't care about that. Well, that's so that you're busy with all that, and I love the YouTube stuff that you've been doing. I think that's great. It's a kind of a different style commentary, and you get to do longer form and talk about what you want to talk about. You know, when you're working with producers, whether you're an anchor or whether you're a guest, the team comes up with the issues and editorializes. And when you're independent, it's good to have an editor or many or producers or partners. But, when you're doing this, you can do whatever you want, whatever you think is most important. And right now, I think talking to you is about a lot of these different issues. I talked to our friend Chrissy Greer yesterday. I want to kind of retread just a little bit of that if people saw or heard that. Just get your general take on how you're seeing first of all, the distraction, it's fair to say, from the Epstein files, but specifically what this militarization of the police and what we're seeing in D.C. I wanted to get your take on how you're seeing that.
So
and how it's being covered too, if you want.
Yeah. So I will say this. The public has a lot of interest in the Epstein files. I am less interested in the Epstein files. As a story itself, it is not that interesting to me. Right?
How is that fucking in any way possible?
So, and here's why. And I understand why much of the public is interested. The story itself doesn't do that much for me because ultimately exposure without consequence doesn't interest me. If you vote for Donald Trump, I mean, the man is in power now. He's established his sort of authoritarian regime. If you voted for Donald Trump, the fact that he is a sex pest, that he assaults women, that he harasses women, all of those things are known. They're already baked into the cake. Right. The man talked about, we're not just talking about grabbing women in their private parts. We're talking about a guy who's like, I had teen pageants and I walked in when women were in various states of undress. So like, it doesn't change much. Okay. So you have the Epstein files and it reveals that Donald Trump was, directly engaging in, sexual activity with children. Okay. Is that going to make anybody change their vote? I doubt it. Well, is that going to make anybody, because all the Republicans will have to do is say, oh, look over here at trans teens playing soccer. And so to me, the value of the Epstein's files is only if, and I've always asked this on the air, I've asked this of guests. I'm like, so if we get these files, are you going to prosecute anybody? If you get these files, are you going to hold anybody else accountable? Because if you don't, I don't necessarily see the point.
So I guess the consequences would be a lack of support for Trump on everything else if he's lying about this thing. This
you
one
really
thing.
Think? Have you not seen the Congress? Have you not seen the Republican Congress for the last 10 years? They won't care. They're going to still support him anyway. The idea, I keep saying this, like this idea that something's going to save us, right? That some magical immunity totem is going to pop in and save us from Donald Trump is just that math ain't math, and that ship has sailed. There could be videos that come out tomorrow showing him, in a all sorts of grotesque sexual behavior with children, and a lot of people would just say, "Oh man, that's AI," or "Oh man, that's terrible," or "Wait, what about Bill Clinton? What about George Soros?"
Right.
So. I don't know. It doesn't move me in the same way. I recognize that it's news and I recognize the public's interest. But for me personally as a citizen, and again, I make the distinction between what is newsworthy and me personally as a citizen, if it ain't attached to anybody going to jail, I'm not that moved.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you weighed in on that. It's a really, as usual, unique and interesting perspective from you. What do you think about, though, the media's coverage of it? Do you think that if you were in charge of mainstream media, how would you cover it or not cover it?
If I were in charge of mainstream media, then the number one question, which is what I ask when I'm on the air, I'm like, what happens when it gets out? What happens when it gets out? What happens? Are you going to prosecute people? Because if you're not going to prosecute people, it's kind of like me saying, okay, it's like, we've seen this a million times with Trump, right? It's like his tax returns. It's like, everybody turns in their tax returns for the run for president. You're going to turn in your tax returns? No, I'm not going to turn in my tax returns. I think, like Rachel Maddow got like a piece of his tax returns once after he got elected the first time. And it's one of those things where it's like, and that was valuable. Like I thought the journalism she was doing was fantastic because it's like, yes, This is information the public needs to know. If this man has conflicts of interest, the public needs to know. But if Congress is too feckless to hold him accountable or to establish boundaries for the conflicts of interest, okay, it's exposed. It's good to know. But I want to move on to the things that actually control his behavior, constrain his behavior, or hold him accountable. Shame doesn't work for people who are essentially shameless.
That's a soundbite.
Mm-hmm. I believe the kids say bars.
So what do you think is most important? I mean, what do you want to there's two things that I think I really want to get your take on, but maybe there's something more important that I'm missing in terms of the fascist takeover from the Department of Homeland Security actions across the country, and the deportations is a big deal, to the militarization of the police and the takeover of Washington D.C. and having there seeming to be no limits, according to Tom Homan, on the president's authority. And I also obviously thought it's really important to talk anytime we can about what the federal government led by Trump is doing in terms of erasing history. So about, and I'm sure I already covered, what they're trying to do with the museums, the Smithsonian museums. Mm-hmm. And then finally, tying all that together, I'm sure you saw that Department of Homeland Security put out a recruiting promotion.
Oh, the Stormtrooper recruiting poster? Join the Empire, defeat the rebels? Yeah.
The one I'm talking about is I think it's protect your culture, join ICE.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's something out of Star Wars. It's join the Empire, fight the rebels. Stop those crazy space wizards. Yeah, I mean, look, it is. I just watched Inglourious Bastards last night. It's the first time I rewatched it in like a long time.
That's so good. I can talk about it. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
That's a movie I'm really familiar with, so I feel like, oh, what's he going to say?
And part of what's interesting about Inglourious Bastards is the whole thing, right, revolves around culture. And the idea that you have people arguing and debating about culture in the midst of a military and physical takeover, right? Like these Germans are arguing about, well, whether we should have this movie or how this movie should be seen, what movie should be seen, while occupying Paris, while taking people out of their homes, putting them in concentration camps, murdering families, but there's still at its core a discussion of culture, because ultimately he or she who controls the culture controls how people respond to the violence that they're being subjected to in a military way. That's what we see happening in the country, right? If you are, I was in Los Angeles in June when the president invaded Los Angeles under the guise of stopping immigration, right? Same thing in D.C. where it's like, oh, we're here to stop crime. To the degree that you ever have any discussions about what the president's premises are, you're already giving him and ceding him too much power. It does not matter, because the reason is going to change, right? In New York, they're going to go to New York and they're going to say, we're stopping Sharia. They're going to go to Philly and they're going to say, we're stopping black militants. They're going to go to Detroit and they're going to say, we're stopping crime. They're going to go to Chicago and say, we're going to stop the Chi. It's going to be a different BS excuse for every single major metropolitan area. The only criteria is this president is saying, I will literally send the military to intimidate and abuse American cities in places I don't like. That's the issue. It ain't a crime issue, because the crime is not a driving force. Also, why wouldn't you send people to Houston? Because it's in a red state. Why wouldn't you send people to Atlanta? Because it's in a red state. So that's my thing with this. This is authoritarianism, and it is fascism. And to the degree that these armed guards are going to be empowered to get more aggressive and more violent with people, and that their accountability structure is not going to be connected to any municipal powers that you can interact with. If I get mistreated by a cop in Memphis, Tennessee, I can go to the local police department and complain. I can go to my city council and complain. I can go to police union and complain. I can go to my mayor and complain, ward president, whatever. There is a line of accountability that you can find. If you are bringing in federal troops to just harass the hell out of people whenever they walk down the street, who the hell do you call? And that's before they've got masks. So this is just stormtrooper behavior. That's the most important thing to me. I could give a rat's derriere about Sydney Sweeney and her non-derriere and whatever it is she's doing. I don't care about that sort of stuff as much. Yes, you have white nationalists showing up in commercials. Is it new? Her and the other guy who was from the Summer I Became Pretty nonsense. That's par for the course. I just saw The Naked Gun. There was a lot of MAGA-coded stuff in that, even though I thought it was funny.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a funny movie, but a lot of MAGA stuff in there. The UFC, the whole thing about like roasting your genitals so that you're more virile and everything else like that. There's a lot of MAGA-coded stuff in the movie.
It's such a weird one. You mentioned, and a lot of people are making a similar point about why is he sending it into D.C. or black cities and not red states. Well, there's black people in all of those red state cities. And I don't think the white folks in the cities care about more law enforcement. In fact, they welcome it. It makes them feel safer. I just had an argument with some white lady here in my local community. She's like, my daughter's going to D.C. and I'm glad that there's all that law enforcement out and she's safer. And so I feel like this is something to signal, regardless of where we're sending them, it really is to protect you from the black and brown people, the immigrants who are here to rape and pillage. And that's just making their case for them and making them feel better. Is it not as simple as that? What am I missing?
Well, that's part of it. But I mean, again, that's for people who already believe in this kind of crap, right?
Well, yeah.
Like, if that mom who you were talking to was already like, oh my God, I'm afraid of my daughter going to Washington, D.C. D.C. ain't any safer or worse. In fact, obviously by every actual mathematics statistic, right? It's not just crime has gone down, but it's at some of the lowest rates they've had in the last 15 or 20 years. I just had Brandon Scott on, who's the mayor of Baltimore. Brandon Scott is 42 years old. The mayor of Baltimore is 42 years old. He's in his second term. He has achieved in the first 6 months of 2025 the lowest homicide rate in 50 years. The lowest homicide rate in his lifetime.
Baltimore is a tough city to lead.
Yes. And he's in his second term at only 42 years old, just got reelected. So the point is, there are ways that you can achieve mass reductions in crime. And guess what? They never seem to be associated with hiring more or paying more for cops.
This violent interruption policy that is, I think, first piloted in Chicago. I know a guy who's running it in D.C. I'm sure they're using it across the country now because it's so unbelievably wildly effective, especially for gang violence. It's not law enforcement. It's not more cops on the street. And it's not, by the way, this is a black thing. Black people will argue for corporal punishment. I was on Larry Wilmore's show with a panel of 3 black people arguing about spanking, and it was 3
Who were these black people
versus me. Smart, educated.
Was this his TV show on Comedy Central, or was this his podcast?
TV show.
Who did he have? Who was on this show? Because I have terrible things to say about all of them. Who were you on the show with?
I'm going to try to find the clip. And okay. So it was a real weird thing because I'd never argued with black people, period, much less on the air in that way. Mm-hmm. So that was weird for me. But this guy on Fox News last night, I think his name was like Jack Brewer, black guy, arguing we just need to bring back corporal punishment. Anyway, you can answer to all of that. But the more important and ridiculous point is that we need more law enforcement. When, as you said, there's so many proven tactics that are being utilized now to bring down violence, and we should resource them. But that's not what we see ever from conservative Republicans, because they know that putting more stormtroopers on the street gets them more votes, gets them more support. But you don't agree with corporal punishment?
No, God. No. First off, I don't know if you've ever had her on the show, because I'm sure I've made reference to her. Dr. Stacey Patton.
Yes, I remember that episode you did. Yes.
So, I ain't a spanking person. And I know there's a lot of sort of, what do you call it? Stockholm syndrome with people who were physically punished as children who grew up and say, I turned out great. Yeah, you know what? It's the Chris Rock joke of, you have the uncle that molests you, but he also pays for you to go to college. So it's like, well, I guess it paid off. No, it didn't, right? Being corporal punished, being spanked, being hit as a child, it is not healthy psychologically. It is not healthy physically. It is not what is commanded in the Bible for people who use that excuse. It is generally bad parenting. It is bad parenting. You can discipline children. You can hold children accountable. You can navigate children without having to physically harm them. I mean, I'm sorry, because, when you hit kids, it don't necessarily lead to changes in behavior. You can play all the hot stove examples that you want. You don't have to burn your child's hand and say, don't touch the hot stove. So the thing about corporal punishment in the black community is a lot of it is rooted in sort of retained trauma from enslavement. And the idea that
trauma. I talked to
the idea that I want to teach you to fear me because fearing me is likely to drive you better than facing the consequences of an outside world that wants you dead. And let's be very clear about the term trauma. I've been listening to Gabor Mate recently. It's been very, very fascinating, very helpful. And a lot of people conflate these terms pain and trauma, right? Pain is what you feel in the moment. Trauma is if the wound is unhealed. Lots of pain you heal from, so it doesn't end up being trauma, right? Black people have never been able to collectively heal from white nationalism, white violence, and supremacy because that's how this country operates. So we still live in trauma. That being said, I ain't never going to argue to whip children. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's wise. It didn't make me a better person. And my parents didn't do it a lot, but it wasn't ever necessary to begin with. But black people will argue this till the cows come home, at least those who I think are less enlightened.
I found the episode and I'm going to go watch it. I hope I didn't misremember it, but I do feel like it was one against.
Send me the link, text it to me because I will watch that during the day or I'll catch it sometime tonight.
It was like one woman was like a parenting expert and I fashion myself a parenting expert from time to time. And a comedian, so that's why they booked me. But yeah, so anyway, we'll go back to that. And to what was the other thing I asked you about? Well, I think they wrapped it up.
So we were talking about that, and we were talking about sort of the ICE stuff and all these other kinds of things. I'll mention this also because this has to do with, say, Texas, right? And you got all these people who are on the run from Texas trying to stop Abbott from, this gerrymandering thing. And here's where I have to be like super duper honest. Everybody has to decide where they're going to draw their line in the sand for a fascist regime. Okay. There's just no world in which you can say that random federal agents, mad because you're flagrant, walking around with masks and no identification, grabbing people out of cars, homes, and businesses is okay. Period. Full stop. If you are not okay with that, you have to decide as an American citizen where you're going to stop. Are you going to report it? Are you going to call it? Are you going to do something? These people in Texas right now, these legislators who have left.
Yeah.
I understand the challenge that they're facing. I've had conversations with lots of people who are involved in this and people who are directing strategy. It's not easy to leave your home. It's not easy to flee the state. People got jobs, lives, bills. State legislators don't make very much money. They make like $600 a month for 3 months when the legislature's in session, right? But here's the thing. You don't have to capitulate and go in and give Abbott what he wants because Republicans just want to rig the system so they never get held accountable by the voters. There are representatives in Texas right now who didn't leave the state. They got one woman down there. She's the longest serving member, I think, in the House. She was just on Roland Martin's show. I think it was last night. And she was like, I didn't leave because she's old. She's like, come get me. Pull up. Come to my house.
Oh, man.
Send a cop to my house and try and arrest me and drag me into the state house. Why? If I don't go to my job at Jimmy John's, the boss at Jimmy John's cannot send state troopers to come get me and say, you got to come back here and slather butter on sandwiches.
Does that state rep work at Jimmy John's?
No. Oh. But if she did work at Jimmy John's and the head of Jimmy John's International said, we're going to bring you back into work, I don't think they do it. If I decided to not show up to work at Morgan State, I would be very shocked if probably Wes Moore himself, because he's kind of a big dude, but I doubt that Wes Moore would send cops after me and say, you got to bring your black rear end back into the building. That's not how this sort of stuff works.
What if you worked at Jersey Mike's?
Some Jersey boys. That's kind of a different situation.
I think they've expanded. Okay, well, I got to let you go, I guess, but man.
Firehouse subs, though, because they could carry me out of my house. So it's
a chain sub restaurant is a risk, but it's a risk I generally have taken in my life.
Yeah. Well, also, you've had the benefit of being in and around metropolitan New York where you can get just actual Subways, actual deli sandwiches that are made.
you go to a good deli and they have good meat and whatever.
Yeah. I most of the places I've lived in my life, I don't have that. I haven't had that opportunity.
Well, I hope you're eating well. It makes it making me sound like you're not eating well.
No. But I cook a lot. I've told you this, Pete. I am a cook.
I know, but how do you come on? You're not cooking when you're doing all that traveling. You said at the beginning of this conversation. There's no way. How do you cook on the road?
Believe it or not. So it's one, because I sort of bounce from house to house a lot of times or visit different people. I will stay with people and cook at their houses. I will get, relatively healthy food where I am. Like I said, I'm recovering from having a tooth pulled, so it ain't like I'm eating heavy stuff anyway. I'm still dealing with
brutal. Yeah,
I'm still having a lot of soup and stuff like that. So I tend to eat very healthy, and then when I'm home, I cook. I had these giant squashes and zucchinis that a friend of mine gave me from like their garden. And I ate squash and zucchini. I had every single damn recipe you can think of for squash and zucchini for like a week and a half. The only thing I didn't make was zucchini cranberry salad because I didn't think I could eat it with my jaw being off.
Well, and also because it sounds fucking gross.
Oh, yeah. But it doesn't mean you don't try. That's how I usually cook. I get an ingredient at like a dragon fruit or whatever. I get an ingredient on Monday and I just make stuff with it throughout the entire week.
Everybody watching and listening thinks that you're doing it right and that you're better, but there are some people who identify with me and say, no, I don't need to try that. I'm good.
You know what? Those people, the people like you, Pete, are Al-Qaeda. So, we don't have to. We know you're with Al-Qaeda. We know that you don't have a real commitment to American.
All the way. There should be some kind of a phrase or reference to when you go all the way to Al-Qaeda. But
I had to go early 90s. I had to go late 90s, early 2000s.
I think the funnier joke there is naming some well-known murderer or sociopath.
If you're going to go full Dahmer, you're going to go full Dahmer.
In my case, I get a lot of Kaczynski, white bearded guy, lives in a shed, hates technology. Almost
there is that. There is that. Didn't he die recently?
Yeah.
He didn't die in like the last 6 or 7 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I remember that. Him, Kevorkian, all those guys, all these white guys with K's in their names.
But his manifesto lives on.
This is true. It's probably somewhere on Reddit. Or my personal favorite, because I've been convinced that 80% of TikTok is just Zoomers discovering crap that we already knew and acting shocked and offended. I'm sure there's some 23-year-old Zoomer right now being like, have you heard of this guy, Ted Kaczynski? Oh my God, he had a manifesto. That's all you have on TikTok.
Next time you see one of those types of things happen, send it to me, because I do know that was a case with bin Laden, right? But I didn't know that was something that was more widely spread. That's crazy. That's crazy if people are learning things now and learning them in such a way that is not accurate. And that was the last thing I didn't get you to weigh in on, how important it is to, understand history, much less erase it or create it in what we're seeing is a kind of a white supremacist version of it. Right. Last night you had that woman, I forget her name, on CNN arguing.
Jillian, the fitness person.
It was, I've heard that argument for a long time from white supremacists and ignorant folks and people who live down south, but just kind of whitewashing history and a way that I was so unbelievably disgusted and uncomfortable with as a way to defend what they're redoing in terms of federal government. I don't know. Say something about that and then I'll let you go. What they're doing and why it matters.
So there's a couple things with that, and I'll say just right off the top, I'm not usually a fan of that format. And the reason I'm not a fan of that format is because you put together a group of people to discuss a series of topics, but not all of them are equally informed, right? So if you want to have Jillian to come on and talk about RFK Jr. and fitness and health, I guess, I don't know. She's probably more qualified than he is to discuss those sorts of things. But once you start letting people, and it only happens with the right, once you start letting people just kind of pop off and say whatever the hell they want, you kind of need to put some control editorially or organizationally on what's happening. And I see a lot of nonsense, misinformation, and frankly, bullying on some of these debate shows. And it's always from the right on the left. And I don't see enough moderation of it. You can have vigorous debate and discussion, but you can't just let people say whatever the hell they want, because everybody isn't Mehdi Hassan, right? So, and I want to say this because this goes to the history. This has happened because we haven't had a chance to chat. That whole Mehdi Hassan thing he did with Jubilee.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Like, I did not like it. I didn't find it nearly as interesting as the numbers would indicate. And the main reason why is because this was a bad faith platforming of just fascists and Nazis. Mehdi Hasan literally wrote a book, How to Win Every Argument Every Time, No Matter the Circumstances, right? This wasn't even an intellectual version of like pros versus Joes, right? If you send me up against Deion Sanders, Deion is older than me, right? Then again, he's missing a toe now.
Missing a toe now.
But I was about to say, if you put me against Deion in a foot race and that man is older than me, he might still be able to beat me, right? Yeah. Michael Jordan might still be able to beat me, and that man is in his 60s. So it's not good content other than it sort of normalizes these crazy fascist beliefs that are being expressed. That is not a good thing. That is not a healthy thing. There have been Jubilee debates that I thought were useful. The one with Jordan Peterson versus a bunch of atheists was actually fascinating. But what you'll notice about that is the atheists were all really informed.
Well, they always are.
Yeah, aren't they though? Like people who don't believe in, I won't say that, but atheists are like, I've never met a dumb atheist.
Yeah, because they're driven by a curiosity about the afterlife, and they usually often come from a religious background. And my whole education started and ended with George Carlin. I was like, I'm good. I don't need any more. But no, I absolutely see what you're saying in terms of you're not a fan of a show or you're obviously not a fan of platforming fascists because it could normalize them. But also it's a ridiculous thing to put Maxwell Frost on with a YouTube star or even a Republican or Democratic strategist. And PhDs like you and Chrissy are always irritated, and rightfully so, when a show books someone like, say, me versus someone like you to talk about something. And that's a fair concern. Forget it if you don't want to use me, but you know what I'm saying? Like people with an agenda, or people that just don't have any right to be sitting at that table with that other person. This person's an expert on fascism, and this person's Scott Jennings. It's ridiculous.
And that's my thing. If it was about discussion, I don't have a problem. It's the debate where I have a problem.
Yeah, right. You don't have a problem with a format of well-educated people who are very disagreeable. You have a problem with putting a minor league baseball, it's not even a good example.
Or my thing is simply having people on the air who are not qualified to discuss that issue. So if you want to drag him out of whatever, community theater he's doing, you want to drag out Dean Cain, who hasn't been Superman since the first Nintendo Game Boy came out. You want to drag out Dean Cain and discuss wokeness in Hollywood, I guess, but I think you could probably find somebody who is still more actively involved in the industry to have that discussion. That is reasonable. That is a reasonable thing to do. What I don't like, and this is not entirely new, I remember this in the 90s. It was ABC Nightly News or NBC Nights, one of the nightly news shows, and they had a debate between like a climate scientist and Rush Limbaugh. What the hell, right? Rush Limbaugh shouldn't be debating climate science. If you want Rush Limbaugh to debate football, fine. It's entertainment. He can discuss it as much as the next person. That's where my frustration comes in, that you have people who aren't qualified to talk about the subject that's there. You notice I ain't going to get on the air and talk about Ukrainian military policy because I'm not an Eastern Bloc expert. I could talk about domestic response to what's happening in Ukraine, but I'm not a Ukrainian expert, right? So I say that to say that kind of faux intellectualism and that idea of turning serious debates into a dopey discussion, that kind of let's debate the merits of German versus French films while people are being dragged out of their homes in Paris during the occupation and the Vichy government is twiddling their thumbs while this occurs, that leads to the erasure of history, because if every debate has to be concluded by the end of a commercial break or the end of a TikTok, then people don't realize that some of these things are long-term relevant issues that need to be discussed and addressed, and sometimes you don't have a clean answer.
That's such a great and important point. And the only thing I would add to it is when you have a historian arguing with a fitness expert, everybody loses in a way. And what it leads to, which is what you said, what it leads to, I think probably the best actual real answer and most imminently is the erasure of history is real bad But the probably more prominent thing is the erasure of science. And what platforming conspiracy theorists and ignorant people leads to is the Health and Human Services Secretary with the brain worm, the conspiracy theorist in chief.
Who eats dead bear meat. Who
will
eats bear meat off the highway.
Who will have a great opportunity to be our next president. I mean, this guy is now taken seriously, and he's in charge of the federal government's research, health, and that's what it leads to when you bring these people on and platform them, because they're convincing. Yeah. They're convincing.
Yeah, for dumb people, but lots of people are dumb.
Well, for ignorant people, for people who have no idea about history or about a subject, and you listen to someone who's articulate and eloquent with their arguments, it's convincing. Yeah. Even if you have critical thinking skills, like, well, I didn't know that. I'd never heard that. And that's how they get you. A lot of people. And of course, if you're dumb, but I was giving them a little break. All right, go be with your family. Have a great day. It must be fun to hang out with you if you're a kid.
Dude, yes, I'm going to try and hit you up this week. We need to like catch up. So I will hit you off the air. We have tons of stuff to catch up on.
Anytime,
and other things. Yeah. So I'm going to try and hit you up this weekend. Yes,
I would really look forward to that. We will take a walk on the phone. Awesome. All right, bud. Thank you very much. Click out so I can talk about you. All right, that's it. That's where I hit stop for you right now. So I hope that you liked it. That's Dr. Jason Johnson, and he's always awesome at Morgan State University, of course, is where you can find him, as well as on MSNBC. He did a great podcast for Slate. Many of those episodes are evergreen and super relevant, like the one that he mentioned there about corporal punishment. That was a great episode. Anyway, love Jason. Always happy when he joins me, and I'm super happy that you joined me today. And any day that you can, tell your friends and family members and any of your followers on the social media, your networks, about the show. The more promotion you can do, the better. StandUpWithPete.com. If you've never been there, it's a good place to kind of start. Though I need to do a promo, reintroduce myself. I see a lot of well-established people in media and other brands reintroducing themselves. But that's a lot of work, you know, gotta make those videos and stuff like that. So, I'll fit it in. Plenty of time. All right, folks. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you'll join me tonight at the Hangout. If you're a paid subscriber, I host Hangouts Monday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Really one of the best benefits of membership, and so worth it. So please go pay and sign up so we can continue doing it, because you didn't hear any ads. Not on this show. But you will always hear John Carroll. He is a singer-songwriter, an award-winning singer-songwriter, founding member of the Starland Vocal Band, still out there touring, still out there producing amazing original content all the time, which is why we love him also as a person. JohnCarroll.org to go buy his new album, and I will talk to you later.
Stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the seat of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience. package to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide.